It's 1912 in Vienna, Austria. A 24-year-old impressionable man is being shaped by the nationalist views of political demonstrators after an attempt at jump-starting his art career fails. On June 23rd, on the other side of Europe, a soon-to-be revolutionary boy is being brought into the world at Warrington Lodge in London. This is the story of that boy, the development of his mathematic genius, and how those gifts helped defeat the war criminal, Adolf Hitler, as well as lay the framework for modern computer science and redefine mathematical principles. The Enigma of Alan Turing, the man, the math, and the mystery. In 1923, an inspired young student writes home to his parents in a letter outlining plans for a new kind of typewriter. Those around him begin to get the sense that this boy isn't an ordinary young man. Years later, his headmistress at his primary school remarks, "I have had clever boys and hardworking boys, but he is a genius." Months later, and 900 miles away, Hitler begins work on his autobiography, Mein Kampf, during his 9-month prison sentence. As the next decade unfolds, Hitler continues to develop nationalist strategies and propaganda, while he assembles troops to launch the largest and deadliest war in world history. As Hitler's strategies become bolder, mathematical genius Alan Turing develops the complex algorithms which will eventually take Hitler down. In 1939, World War II begins. By the end of this war, 3.4 million tons of bombs were dropped by the Allies, 6 billion Jews were dead, and 72 million were dead worldwide. Alan Matheson Turing was an exceptional mathematician, remarkable cryptanalyst, and a savior of many lives during one of the most horrible times in our history, World War II. Alan's impressive accomplishments during the war, as well as his groundbreaking achievements in the field of mathematics, have created a legacy which continues to inspire modern-day mathematicians as well as computer scientists. In 1926, Alan was studying at Sherborne School in Dorset, where he would meet his best friend, Christopher Morcom. A professor of Christopher and Alan's remarked on the two, "I always thought that they were the two most brilliant boys I have ever taught." Alan and Christopher were very close, and when Christopher died of bovine tuberculosis in 1930, it left Alan devastated. In October of 1931, Alan went to King's College in Cambridge as a mathematical scholar. His most mathematically acclaimed paper, on computable numbers with an application to the Einstein problem, was an answer to one of the 3 mathematical challenges German mathematician David Hilbert had posed.
Hilbert's dream was to devise some sort of device, some sort of mechanical device, which could determine whether any given statement was true or false in mathematics. So that would essentially relegate the discovery of mathematical truth to drudge work which could be farmed out to machines. Well, what Alan Turing did in his paper was he defined in a mathematically precise way what it means to compute and what it means to carry out an algorithm. And then he used this formalism to prove with mathematical certainty that no such program can ever be written. In other words, you can never write a program which will determine for any given mathematical statement whether it is true or not. So that put an end to Hilbert's program.
When war broke in September of 1939, Alan was recruited by the Naval Intelligence Division at Bletchley Park. His job was considered to be impossible. He was faced with cracking the German coding system, called Enigma. The Nazis were very confident in their Enigma machine, and they knew it would be an important piece in winning the war. The first Enigma machine was invented in 1918, and the Germans quickly employed it for military use. The Enigma took messages from the Germans and, using a code designated for that day, rearranged the letters in the message to something completely unrecognizable. The German Navy Enigma was considered unbreakable, and it was Alan's and his crew's job to crack it. There were said to be only 2 people who thought that the Navy Enigma could be broken: Frank Birch, the head of Bletchley Park's Naval Intelligence Division, because it needed to be broken, and Alan Turing, because it was an interesting problem. The team that Alan led at Bletchley Park included Gordon Welchman, Peter Twin, Sean Wiley, Hugh Alexander, Jack Good, Peter Hilton, and Joan Clark. Alan recruited codebreakers by asking them to complete a crossword from the telegraph in under 12 minutes. One of the members of his team, Joan Clark, was the only woman assigned to the Enigma mission, and her official title was linguist because the field of cryptanalytics was reserved strictly for men. In 1941, Alan and his team designed a machine to decipher Enigma messages. The machine was loosely based off of the groundwork of Polish mathematician cryptanalysts who copied the wiring of the German coding machine, Enigma, and then devised a code-cracking machine called the Bombe. Alan's radically different coding machine, the Bombe, was decoding 39,000 intercepted German messages per month.
I'm not an intelligence person. I mean, not a historian. But one thing was clear. There was a period when we couldn't decipher the U-boat traffic, and the shipping losses were appalling during that period. And as soon as we got eventually on top of that U-boat traffic, it was absolutely clear what difference it was making to our successes against the U-boats and in bringing cargo into Britain.
It is estimated that Alan's groundbreaking work on Enigma saved 14 to 21 million lives and shortened the war by 2 years. After Alan's work at Bletchley was over, Winston Churchill ordered all records of their work at Bletchley to be burned. Alan and his team's work would remain classified for 25 more years. After the war, Alan began to contemplate the idea of artificial intelligence. He started work at the National Physical Laboratory in Teddington in 1945. During his time at NPL, he was awarded the Order of the British Empire. At the NPL, Alan designed the plans for the automatic computing engine, ACE. These plans were deemed too ambitious by Alan's colleagues at the NPL, and as a result, Alan took a sabbatical. The NPL would go on to create a lesser version of Alan's ACE, called the Pilot ACE, using Alan's ideas. After Turing left the NPL, he devised a way to determine if a machine could think, called the Turing test. Turing believed in the fact that one day computers would be able to rival human intelligence. In Alan's last years, he worked independently in his home. In 1952, he was robbed by a friend of his male lover. He reported the burglary to the police, but during the course of their investigation, Alan was charged with gross indecency. He was forced to choose between 2 years in prison or estrogen therapy. He chose the latter option because he couldn't live in a place where he wouldn't be able to work on his projects. 2 years later, in 1954, Alan Turing committed suicide by ingesting an apple laced with cyanide, eerily similar to Hitler's death by cyanide almost a decade earlier. This was the story of two leaders, one who led the world to war, and the other who quietly led a team of mathematicians to bring the war to an end. It is a tale of one leader who sought the spotlight, and the other who shunned it. While Hitler's legacy was written in history books, Turing's was hidden in classified files. 60 years later, the world is discovering Alan Turing's legacy. An award has been named in his honor. In 2012, the 100-year anniversary of his birth was deemed the Alan Turing Year.
Most people who have heard of Alan Turing know him for his work breaking the code, which of course was extremely important, but it wasn't especially mathematically groundbreaking. His real legacy was in his discovery of the essential creativity of mathematics. What that paper did was it proved mathematically that mathematical truth is an essentially creative process, that it can never be mechanized, that there is something in the human mind having to do with insight, having to do with inspiration, having to do with creativity that cannot be duplicated by a computing device. This is the legacy of Alan Matheson Turing. And he deserves to be mentioned in the same breath with Euclid and Archimedes and Newton. His contribution was that big.